I look at that part of my life as probably the most spiritual time in my life, and not that I brought my spirituality with me, but that I learned a lot from being in those places where life and death is so fragile, and that I was often meeting people, even at the time younger than me, who were engaged in these wars and these battles and these feuds that they couldn't even really fully articulate. They were generations worth of wars that they had sort of fallen themselves into. So it's in that type of environment that when you start to understand what people really believe in and what drives them and what are the questions they're asking, the answers they're finding that are really spiritual. So for me, that's kind of what motivated me to keep on doing it for some time, was just the incredible stories that I was hearing and witnessing. Right around the time that I got engaged, my wife decided. I think that was part of it. I think it was not a lifestyle that's conducive to settling down, having a family, and all of that. But I think one of the things that and it's interesting because so much has changed since then. But one of the things that really frustrated me about being a journalist was that journalists are taught to be objective and not to get involved in the story. And as I started to go back to places like Israel and go into the West Bank and multiple times over the years and see that instead of things getting better, they were getting worse, and they were getting more desperate, more impoverished, more violent, all of that. It really was starting to affect me and depress me. And I decided, while I didn't want to just sort of pretend like it wasn't happening, that there were different ways of engaging in those sorts of problems and trying to help rather than just sort of reporting. Obviously, the news industry has changed so much, and now you don't necessarily have to be a journalist or have trained to be a journalist to actually tell the stories. I mean, we can all tell them with little cameras and iPhones and stuff like that. So, yeah. So I think it's really exciting actually to be part of the journalist community, and in a way, I find myself back again, part of it, without all the rigid rules and conventions that used to come with it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I necessarily had hardship. I witnessed a lot of hardship. I've been very fortunate in the family that I've grown up in, and the type of love and support that I've always had in my life. I think anytime anybody who has anybody who has children realizes that it shifts your entire point of view on the world, and no longer is it sort of that you're seeing the world from your own point of view as much as you're seeing it from your child's. And so I think for me, certainly that's had a pretty dramatic effect. And as I look at the world and as I look at the incredible transformative time that we're a part of, and I say, how can I be a part of it? How can I contribute to it? How can I make sense of it for my child? I think those are all spiritual questions and spiritual experiences. I think I certainly can take a lot of what I've learned and witnessed and bring it, but every day is a new adventure, and as soon as you think you know something, reality humbles you. Certainly having a child humbles you, being married humbles you. So I think all of those things, convince me that, even a book like this is just, it's more asking questions than it is, providing answers. And I think that's sort of the irony is, books are often perceived as, especially books in this genre, as you're teaching, you're communicating lessons. But I think, every author knows, well, I was just asking questions. I was just trying to figure it out myself. And in some ways, if that helps other people ask questions of themselves, then you've certainly accomplished what you set out to do. I think, what my father has been able to do very successfully over the years is to, he's a very skilled speaker. He's obviously a very skilled writer. I hope to have learned some, emulated some of that. But I think what he does, and to some degree what I do well, is I articulate questions that people are either asking or feeling, even if they haven't asked themselves yet. I think all of us at certain points in our lives, and it doesn't take being a parent, doesn't certainly take being a dog owner, but is we ask ourselves, what's the purpose of my life? What, does my life have meaning and significance? Is there a God? If there is a God, does she love me? Do I have a soul? I mean, these are all sort of spiritual questions that we ask ourselves, and sometimes we answer them in the sort of most mundane of circumstances. Other people have, quote unquote spiritual experiences and awakenings, and so I think, for me, what I've tried to do is just help articulate some of the questions and shed some light on the path, but everybody has to walk the path themselves. I'm certainly not going to provide the answers to the meaning of life for someone else. I think, the thing that's most special to me about my memories with Michael is that, while of course I was conscious of the fact that he was such an incredibly huge celebrity and superstar, I was also conscious, especially in the last few years, of the scandals, and, he was the sort of scandal-plagued celebrity also. But I knew him as something very normal, and that's special to me. So I knew him as I know many of my closest friends, and he was a real person, and he was very conscious himself of what people thought of him for good or for bad, and I think that was difficult for him also. But I remember, these sort of playful moments, and one of the moments when, he was afraid of dogs because of some bad experiences growing up around fighting dogs. But, Cleo and his interactions with Cleo and, her being playful with him, I like to think, helped him also get more comfortable with dogs. And I know by the end of his life, he'd actually gotten some dogs for his children who loved, having dogs around the house. So I like to think she played some part in making him more comfortable with that. I think it's an incredible medium. I'd love to. And now with all these new platforms of iPads and Androids and all of these things, I mean, there's never been a better time, I think, to be sort of in the graphic novel space. And so it's a great way for, I think, creators, because people love the visual medium, and creators love being able to have an idea here and then be able to see it here in pictures. So certainly, I haven't thought about that as yet, but it's a good idea.